When global tensions reached a point where a nuclear conflict seemed possible, the United States Army developed a secluded city designed to operate even in the most challenging circumstances. It was built 100 feet beneath Greenland's icy surface, where temperatures dropped to -50 degrees Celsius, and months of darkness shaped daily life. However, an unexpected issue arose, one that authorities worked carefully to keep from public view, and for many years, their efforts nearly prevailed. Located in the far north of the highest latitude nation on Earth, the Arctic endures temperatures that can fall to -50 degrees Celsius. An enormous ice sheet, reaching more than 3 kilometers in thickness, covers roughly 80% of the land. To grasp the scale, think of the New York City skyline, then consider that this ice sheet rises so high that it completely surpasses those skyscrapers, standing above them like a towering frozen presence. During the winter months, the polar night settles over the region, continuing for weeks or even months. This long stretch of darkness is accompanied by powerful storms moving across the land at 72 kilometers per hour. The Arctic also experiences whiteouts, intense weather conditions that blend fog, snow, and rushing wind until the landscape disappears. In a whiteout, visibility falls to nearly zero, leaving only an unbroken field of white in every direction. This was the environment the United States chose as the site for constructing a city. Camp Century served as the first stage. The long-term plan was to develop a series of cities and bases stretching across an area 3 times the size of Denmark. This leads to an important question: what purpose could be so significant that it required building in such a challenging setting? America's interest in Greenland reaches back many years. The story starts in the 1950s when U.S. Army engineers began searching for a suitable site to build an underground military base. By May 1959, they had selected a general region in Greenland, and a small survey group was sent to study the area. The team soon identified the exact location and moved forward with drilling work. At this stage, a reasonable question arises. Greenland is part of Denmark, so how could the United States enter foreign territory and begin building a military installation? The explanation goes back to agreements made during the Second World War. When Nazi Germany occupied Denmark in 1940, the United States stepped in to help protect Greenland from a possible attack. In exchange, Denmark granted the Americans the right to set up military bases on the island. The agreement relating to the defense of Greenland, signed in 1941, was later renewed and expanded into the 1951 Greenland Defense Agreement. This allowed the United States to keep its bases on the island well after the war ended. The timing became especially important. Right after the war, the United States entered a Cold War with the Soviet Union. Greenland's location, almost equally distant from Washington and Moscow, made it a strategically valuable region. The official explanation for Camp Century focused on scientific research, including the study of glaciers, climate behavior, and human endurance in extreme cold. Even within the Army, the base's actual mission was shared only with those who needed to know, hidden from many personnel working there. Robert Weiss, a physician assigned to Camp Century in 1963, remembered how unexpected the posting was. He had no prior notice about serving in Greenland. During his first meeting with the colonel, Weiss was told he would be sent to Camp Century, located 800 miles from the North Pole, within a week. The news surprised him completely. The public narrative described Camp Century as a research station committed to scientific progress. When the United States requested Denmark's approval to build the base, it did not reveal its full purpose. The Americans operated freely within established defense zones, including Thule Air Base. However, activities beyond those areas required Danish consent. The Danish government, understanding the broader geopolitical situation, chose to downplay the military role of Camp Century. Decades have passed since Camp Century's construction, and those classified files have finally been declassified. The real purpose was Project Iceworm, one of the most audacious military schemes ever conceived during the Cold War. The plan called for housing more than 600 nuclear missiles within a vast tunnel network spanning an area 3 times the size of Denmark. These missiles would remain mobile, constantly shifting positions beneath the ice sheet, making them virtually impossible for the Soviet Union to detect or destroy in a first strike scenario. Enjoyed the video? Don't just stop at the like button. If you're watching on your phone, hit that hype too. It helps the channel out, and I'm excited to continue bringing you more awesome content. The strategy behind Project Iceworm was bold Traditional missile silos were easy to locate, but missiles hidden beneath thick ice and moved through underground tunnels created a challenge no enemy could easily counter. Destroying such a system would require targeting an area the size of Denmark. Denmark's leaders understood they could not stop the project. American priorities during the Cold War outweighed any objections. They publicly minimized its military role while privately accepting it. Even those stationed there, like Robert Weiss, did not know the plan to hide nuclear missiles under the ice. The concept was innovative, but carrying it out pushed 1960s engineering to its limits. Camp Century became the first permanent base ever built beneath glacial ice. The logistics alone were overwhelming. There were no stores, roads, or airports. Everything had to be shipped to Thule Air Base, which could only receive supplies during a short summer window when sea ice retreated. The journey across unstable Arctic waters was dangerous and costly. From Thule, the Project Iceworm site lay 204 kilometers away. Supplies and personnel had to be carried across the ice on sled convoys pulled by tractor trains called heavy swings. The trip took 3 to 4 days in good weather. Engineers maintained a temporary route known as the Ice Cap Trail, dealing with crevasses, extreme cold, and shifting ice. When crews finally reached the site, they stood in an isolated expanse of endless snow and ice. Construction began during the summers of 1959 and 1960. Because the weather was harsh, crews worked in rotating shifts around the clock. Tunnels were created using a cut-and-cover method. Swiss-made Peter plows carved deep trenches, moving up to 594 cubic meters of snow per hour. The displaced snow compacted into dense material, ideal for building. Curved metal sheets formed tunnel roofs, and more snow was packed on top. Prefabricated buildings were installed inside on stilts to reduce heat transfer. Each building could be completed in roughly a day. An entire underground town developed. A central corridor connected living quarters, latrines, generators, and dining areas. Keeping the tunnels cold enough was the main challenge. A ventilation system circulated frigid air to maintain temperatures at -15 degrees Celsius. Heat from machinery and people made the ice soften, creating slush and weakening the tunnel structure. Engineers had to install large ventilators to remove excess heat. Power came from a portable nuclear reactor producing about 1.5 megawatts. Its modular design allowed transport in sections and assembly on site. It provided long-term energy without constant fuel deliveries. However, it raised political concerns, as it became the first nuclear reactor on Danish territory, and Denmark had no regulations for such a device. Water came from a system created by engineer Raoul Rodriguez. A 150-meter shaft was drilled into the ice, and a heater melted an underground reservoir holding more than 37,000 liters of drinkable water. Soldiers sometimes lowered themselves into the cavern for recreation, experiencing complete darkness far below the surface. The U.S. Army promoted Camp Century publicly, showing it as a scientific base. A military film highlighted construction, facilities, and daily life, but never mentioned Project Iceworm. It did not disclose the plan to deploy 600 missiles across 135,000 square kilometers of ice through 2,100 possible launch points. Although the proposal gained support within the government, technical difficulties and rising costs ultimately led to its cancellation. Even though Project Iceworm was cancelled, Camp Century remained in operation. The base had already been built, crews were stationed there, and the scientific research mission offered a valid reason to keep it running. But at this point in the story, something unusual happened in how the United States government spoke about Camp Century. The military stopped discussing the camp entirely. In the beginning, photographs and video from Camp Century's construction appeared widely across American news outlets. Reporters highlighted the engineering work and the determination required to build the facility. The public followed the project with interest and saw it as a major accomplishment. Then the coverage abruptly ended. What followed was even more surprising. Without explanation and without any formal statement, Camp Century was shut down. The United States military withdrew from the site. The country does not normally give up territory, especially areas with military importance. Strategic locations are typically maintained for many years, even if their original purpose fades. Yet Camp Century was left behind to be compressed and buried by the moving ice. So what could lead to abandoning such a major project? The construction required huge resources. The logistical challenges were met through planning and innovation. The entire facility stood as a remarkable achievement. Still, it was completely abandoned. There had to be a strong reason, something significant that had never been openly explained. To understand why Camp Century was left behind, and to uncover what was really happening at this secret military base beyond the official story, we need to look deeper into the events that took place there. The most intriguing theory about Camp Century suggests it was linked to early plans for space exploration. According to this view, the base acted as a test site to study how people might live in an isolated community and sustain themselves on another world. Its setting created psychological and environmental conditions similar to what a lunar settlement might face. Camp Century's timeline matches the height of the space race, when both the United States and the Soviet Union were competing to lead in space exploration. With major investments in space technology, exploring the idea of long-term lunar bases was a realistic possibility. If planners were seriously considering permanent habitats on the Moon, Greenland would have been a logical testing ground. Any lunar base would need to be underground, since the Moon's surface swings between extreme temperatures from 250 degrees Fahrenheit during the day to -410 at night, just a short distance below the surface. However, temperatures stay near -40 degrees, a cold environment similar to Camp Century. Concept art of proposed lunar or Martian colonies shows tunnel systems linking modular living areas, closely resembling Camp Century's layout. Both rely on interconnected passages, prefabricated structures, and advanced life support systems built to endure harsh environments. If this theory is accurate, Camp Century may have been used to test technology and methods for future space settlements. When long-term lunar colonization was delayed or considered unrealistic, the project lost its purpose. The timing supports this idea. Camp Century closed in 1967, just 2 years before the 1969 moon landing, a moment that revealed how challenging permanent settlement in space would truly be. Another theory offers a very different view of Camp Century's purpose. The weather manipulation theory proposes that the facility contained a central system capable of influencing global weather, creating events such as floods, hurricanes, or earthquakes. Because a device with such potential would draw intense international scrutiny, the theory claims the United States publicly abandoned Camp Century while secretly continuing operations as a classified site. This idea may seem extreme, but weather modification itself is not fictional. Scientists have tested methods to reduce storm strength and influence hurricane formation. The most common and effective technique is cloud seeding, which forces clouds to release precipitation. This method is reliable enough that Dubai uses it regularly to increase rainfall. There is also historical evidence of military involvement in weather alteration. In 1967, the United States Air Force launched Operation Popeye, a weather modification effort in Southeast Asia. By using cloud seeding, they extended the monsoon season to disrupt Vietnamese supply routes along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The operation succeeded in increasing rainfall, proving that weather could be used as a strategic tool. Another theory presents a completely different motive. The survival bunker theory argues that Camp Century was actually built as a shelter for a shadow government. According to this view, influential officials used military funding to create a protected refuge for themselves and their families during a period when nuclear conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union seemed increasingly likely. The idea of powerful individuals building private shelters is not far-fetched. Today, figures such as Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and Jeff Bezos have reportedly invested in expensive bunker systems designed to protect them from global crises. These modern shelters are being built during a time when nuclear tensions are far lower than they were in the 1960s. If wealthy individuals feel the need for bunkers now, interest in such facilities would have been much stronger during the height of Cold War fears. This leads to an important question. Did officials use Project Iceworm as a cover to build an underground refuge for themselves? Several aspects of Camp Century support this interpretation. The base functioned more like a complete underground community than a typical military post. In contrast, Soviet Arctic bases built during the same period included runways and clear military functions. Camp Century lacked any offensive capability. Even the Nazi Arctic station known as Schatzgräber offers a revealing comparison. Although officially presented as a research site for weather data, it still displayed more obvious military traits than Camp Century. This difference strengthens the idea that Camp Century was designed less as a military installation and more as a potential survival shelter for key government figures. A simpler and less dramatic explanation also exists for Camp Century's purpose. The Cold War bragging rights theory suggests the base was built mainly to showcase American technological strength to the Soviet Union. While costly, this kind of display fits the era, as both nations were already spending enormous resources on the space race to prove scientific and engineering superiority. Camp Century was an impressive achievement for its time. Engineers created a functioning underground city 100 feet beneath glacial ice in one of the harshest environments on Earth. It operated entirely on nuclear power, giving it complete energy independence. The base included living quarters, a post exchange, a library, a chapel, and dining facilities. According to this interpretation, the camp existed largely to highlight American innovation. This idea matches the heavy media attention the project received during construction. This leads to a key question. If the base was intended for publicity, why did the media coverage abruptly end? A clue appears in the closing remarks of the U.S. Army's promotional film. The narrator explains that Camp Century transitioned into a full-time Arctic research station staffed by military and civilian scientists from the Polar Research and Development Program. They conducted a variety of experiments aimed at expanding human knowledge of the natural world. It is possible the facility truly shifted from a public demonstration to a genuine research center. Once scientific work began, the media stepped back, allowing researchers to operate without public pressure. When the scientific program eventually ended or moved elsewhere, the camp was quietly closed, receiving little attention because it was no longer part of the public conversation. While Project Iceworm's personnel focused on running the nuclear reactor and carrying out different experiments, they were also involved in a task no one in the Army expected to become historically important. They were drilling deep into the ice. Scientists at the base created a borehole nearly 1,390 meters down, reaching Greenland's ancient bedrock. From this depth they collected core samples and stored them in jars, where they remained largely unnoticed for many years. In 2019, geoscientist Paul Byerman came across these preserved samples in Denmark. He and a team at the University of Vermont examined them and reached a conclusion with major implications for the entire world. Up to that point, researchers believed Greenland's massive ice sheet had existed for several million years and was a long-standing feature of the planet. The core samples showed that the ice sheet was actually far younger than anyone had assumed. This discovery reshaped scientific understanding of Greenland's ice sheet. If the ice was younger than believed, it must have melted and reformed more recently in Earth's history. This means Greenland is far more sensitive to climate change than scientists once assumed. As global temperatures rise, more ice will enter the oceans, raising sea levels and potentially affecting the North Atlantic Current. The North Atlantic Current helps regulate global climate. Any disruption could create widespread climate effects. The Camp Century core samples showed that Greenland's ice is more fragile than expected. A base originally built for Cold War purposes ended up providing key evidence about modern climate risks. The ice covering Camp Century is melting. In the coming decades, what remains of the base will eventually be exposed. This concern partly explains renewed U.S. interest in Greenland. Some proposals involve purchasing the island, while others focus on expanding military activity under the 1951 Greenland Defense Agreement. The official explanation centers on environmental risk. Reports state that more than 47,000 gallons of radioactive waste were left when Camp Century closed. If exposed, these materials could enter the environment. However, this reasoning has raised doubts. It is unusual for the Defense Department to seek control of a location mainly to address contamination, causing some to question the stated motives. One theory suggests Camp Century functioned as a survival bunker during Cold War tensions. Project Iceworm aimed to give the United States an advantage if a Soviet first strike occurred. Although Denmark banned nuclear weapons on its territory, the United States may have secretly moved warheads into the base. Another theory proposes that Camp Century housed experimental weather modification technology. A malfunction could have destabilized the ice sheet, forcing the rapid abandonment of the base and prompting efforts to suppress discussion of its true purpose. Camp Century was essentially lost decades ago. The moving ice sheet slowly crushed the steel frames and wooden buildings left behind, and the site faded from memory. That changed in April 2024, when NASA scientist Chad Green flew over Greenland with ice-penetrating radar. His team was mapping ice sheets and forecasting sea level rise. But the radar revealed something unexpected beneath the surface: the distorted but still recognizable tunnel network of Camp Century. This was not the first rediscovery. Aerial surveys in 2016 had also detected the buried base and uncovered a serious concern for Denmark. When the United States abandoned Camp Century in 1967, it left behind radioactive and toxic waste. Danish officials at the time allowed the waste to remain, assuming the ice would seal it permanently. But the ice is melting far faster than predicted. Scientists estimate that within 70 to 100 years, meltwater will reach the waste. The materials include biological, chemical, and radioactive contaminants, Meltwater could carry these hazards into the ocean, harming ecosystems and possibly entering the food chain. This prompted intense debate in Denmark. Under the 1951 treaty, Denmark is legally responsible for pollution left by U.S. military activities in Greenland, while the United States has no legal obligation to clean up the site. Many argue, however, that the United States still has moral responsibility. The problem is extremely difficult because the waste lies deep beneath heavy ice in one of the most remote regions on Earth, yet inaction becomes more dangerous as melting accelerates. Today, Camp Century survives only in fragments. It remains a symbol of human ambition, a reminder of Cold War tensions, and a mystery that still raises questions. Camp Century began as a bold vision of American technological supremacy and Cold War strategy. It evolved into a secret military project, shrouded in classification and speculation. It ended as an abandoned ruin beneath the ice, a problem deferred to future generations. Now, as climate change forces us to confront that deferred problem, Camp Century transforms once again into a symbol of how the past continues shaping the present and future in ways we never anticipated. The city under the ice will not stay hidden forever. The secrets it contains, whatever they may be, will eventually be revealed. And when that day comes, we will finally learn the complete truth about one of the Cold War's strangest and most mysterious installations. What do you think about Century Camp? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to discover new discoveries that could change your view of the future, watch my video about China discovering a giant city with an endless source of energy at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Click on the tab that appears on the screen now. Enjoy the video. Thanks for being with us. Leave a comment, like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button for more exciting videos. See you next time.